Thursday, everybody. You know what time it is, 2 Eastern, and it is the latest edition of Bold Leaders in Learning. I'm your host, Brandon Busteed, and I am the president of University Partners and global head of Learn Work Innovation at Kaplan. And I'm delighted to have a colleague and a new partner of Kaplan's, CEO of Lambda Chi Alpha, Troy Medley. Troy, thanks for joining us today to talk about the new dynamic value proposition of fraternity that you guys are creating. Great to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
So Troy, I always love to let folks kind of describe their own professional background. I mean, obviously you're the CEO of Lambda Chi now and deeply involved in higher education from that vantage point, but you have a unique background, largely a career in business and CEO roles. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll segue to talking more about what Lambda Chi is up to.
Sure. Well, if you had told me 2 years ago that I would be the CEO of Lambda Chi Alpha, I would have probably laughed at you. But it is probably the greatest honor of my life. I come from a very non-traditional background. I didn't have a lot of male role models growing up. I didn't have any direction at all. And then all of a sudden I find myself in my chapter house with these men that I aspired to be like, and some of our alumni that were starting businesses, and I went to work for one. I worked 12-hour shifts on Saturday with a guy 24 who'd started his own restaurant, and I got to watch the entrepreneurial process play out. And I was an officer, and I was gaining confidence, and I pivoted in terms of what I wanted to do with my life, and I started a business out of college. And over the next 25 years, I started 3 businesses. Worked in private equity backed companies, and was able to create a life I did not even know was possible when I was 18. And so I sold my last business in 2018. I took a year off, and I tried to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And I got a call from a recruiter who said, "Hey, there's an incredibly ambitious new board at Lambda Chi Alpha, and they're looking at numbers that say that fraternity is not working, and they're looking for somebody to come in and shake things up and figure out how to bring a new value proposition to the space. And it just means you have to move from Laguna Beach to Indianapolis." But when I thought about what it had done for me and what we could do for future generations of men and women like me, I said, yeah. And that's what we've been doing for the last 15 months.
Yeah, so 50 months, you're off to a fast start, because we're going to talk about some of the things that you've implemented, and you and I share the entrepreneurial background. I started outside the classroom, company that I helped lead for 11 years, right after I graduated from college as an undergrad, and I've had very entrepreneurial roles in my time at Gallup and at Kaplan, and so I very much appreciate the opportunities that are given to somebody who is in an entrepreneurial role. And of course, as you mentioned, all the incredible mentors, angel investors, right? People who help you along the way. A lot of people think about entrepreneurship as a very lonely kind of eagle flying by itself type of thing. There's moments like that, but you're standing on the shoulders of giants in many ways for the mentors and role models that were out there. And I think you're right. The fraternal experience is something that provides that kind of a platform. So you and I met a little over a year ago now. This was pre-pandemic. We were actually at a beautiful facility in Arizona, talking about the future of higher ed. And I was sharing a lot of statistics about what was happening in terms of the headwinds facing higher ed. Most of that talk was about the lack of confidence in the work readiness of college graduates from pretty much any constituent that you could possibly ask that question of or measure. And I remember we had a brief chat after that as you were just onboarding in your role. A lot's happened since then. You came up with a pretty powerful vision for where Lambda Chi needs to go, addressing some of those numbers that you mentioned that were dwindling. Tell us a little bit about how it's come about and what you're up to.
Well, I do remember you made me mad.
Excellent.
Well, facts are facts.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the decreasing nature of the number of men coming to campus, the number of men joining fraternities. And this was jiving with a lot of the qualitative research I was doing, actually meeting with our men and experiencing this sense of melancholy or fear for their future, and what were they going to do. And they were starting to realize, and you put words to this feeling, they were beginning to realize that they were in on the con, and that they were not being well served by what fraternities were providing or what higher ed was providing. And they were being very specific in what they wanted. They wanted true return on investment on their tuition dollar, and they wanted to be able to connect the theoretical to the practical and come out and be able to show employers what they could do so that they could get a leg up. And after your talk, I wanted to prove you wrong. So we commissioned a bunch of focus groups, and everything we were hearing from the student and from the employer base was, yeah, the employer wasn't happy and the student wasn't happy. And we realized we have a one-to-one relationship with the student who's running a small business. They're taking all of these skills that are being demanded for by the employer base, but there's no program to it. So there's no scalability, there's no replicability. So let's solve that problem. And we reached out, we talked to as many different partners as we could, and it turned out Kaplan had the shortest distance between 2 points in terms of tech, in terms of focus, in terms of understanding, the ability to help us create a hard skill solution, a soft skill solution, and then through working with credibly acclaim, a digital certification. It became kind of the no-brainer solution. So we've been working to build that. We start QA testing with about 175 students in April, and we're going to launch our pilot at 35 chapters in the fall.
Yeah, and so let's talk about exactly what it's designed to do, because I love how you guys have kind of crafted this vision, which is you kind of hinted at it before, right? The role of an officer in the organization. They're already running, a sizable budget on most of these campuses, right? They're in charge of, multifaceted organization in terms of their responsibility, but maybe not necessarily having that translate, beyond the experiential discussion you could have in an interview or whatever, certainly listing that you were an officer within the organization. It didn't translate to having the added, I'll call it polish of some sort of a credential that helps define that really helps measure what that leadership experience was all about. And so obviously the partnership that we're working on together is to help do that, to build, a base of credentialing behind all that, with some real professional skill development. So just tell us a little bit more about what's actually going to happen for those executives within the chapters.
Sure. Well, if I sit down with any of my 185 treasurers right now, they could probably tell me the perfect textbook definition of a cash flow statement, but they can't tell me how much cash they'll have on hand in 4 weeks if their accounts receivable goes from 10% to 20%, and they can't act upon that. Now, they are able to at the end of their experience because they've learned the hard way. Well, we want to take the hard way out of it. Yeah. And so we've got 4 learning journeys initially, one for our president, for our treasurer, for our recruitment chair, philanthropy chair, where we're creating 11 different modules. 4 of them will be specific to the role. 7 will be across the entire platform, because it's just basic soft skills, managing yourself, professional speaking, professional writing, managing stakeholders. It's about 11 to 20 hours of additional work, but it's designed to help them put the theory into practice. So for the treasurer, they'll be actually putting in place a budget, and they'll be reporting on that budget, and they'll be talking about what's working, what's not working. So they'll be able to take the theory, put it into practice, and then explain why. And then there's a capstone project at the end. And then the final thing we do, and this is what will be assessed, is they're going to go through a mock interview where they talk about what I learned and how I will apply it to the workforce when I'm finished. And we're working with NACE and some other employers to help them do that well.
Yeah. I'm just really impressed with how you guys have thought about it. Obviously, we're proud to be a key facet of the overall strategy, but you've linked in organizations, to my understanding, like Credly. You've consulted with groups like NACE, right, to make sure you're aligned with some of the, the standards that they've created. That's I mean, it's unusual to see that level of collaboration. You've obviously done this at a speed that, I mean, we're talking a year, we're talking a calendar year where you guys have been able to kind of go through everything from the focus group process to figuring out the vision, launching this, getting funding for it from your alumni base. Just give me a sense of that. Like, higher ed is not known for moving quickly, right? And fraternities, I would argue, can move faster than the typical university, but fraternities in some respects haven't always moved quickly. How have you been able to move at this pace?
Well, I'm lucky. I'm used to moving at the speed of private equity, where if I can't hit the metrics, they find somebody else to do my job.
Yeah.
And you're just as good as your next quarterly report. So that's kind of just all I know how to do. But we also learn as an entrepreneur that you don't have enough time or money to build it yourself. So how do you figure out what's core? And we're not going to outsource what's core to being a Lambda Chi, but Kaplan is far better at creating hard skill and soft skill training than we. Incredibly is far better at figuring out how to create assessments. So let's figure out how to create a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. And what we bring to the table is we bring a huge market. Yep. So it's attractive to these end users. And what every fraternity and sorority has, we have massive amounts of potential cash because our alumni are paying for this. This is not being passed on to our students. We went to some of our entrepreneurial alumni and we said, this is going to take X number of $1 million to get going and to perpetuate. And they said, do you mean you're going to be able to truly predict and help somebody choose the right career path, so they don't end up having to go back to school 5 to 6 years later? You're going to give them the skills to prove to an employer that they're a sound bet, and they're going to be better off during those first 3 or 4 years. So they're going to move up that much faster. Heck yeah, that's where I want to put my money. So the ingredients are all there. You just I'm old enough to remember the Rubik's Cube. It's just, twisting it a couple ways so that it's the right picture.
Yeah. And one of the things you said as we were kind of chatting before we went live, I'd asked the question, kind of what came first, right? Did you have some alumni who came and said, I'd really like, to make an investment in something like this? Or was it more, you identifying this and then going out? And it sounds like, based on your answer, it was a little both. Just, is that the case? I mean, what were
it's almost like the Big Bang.
Yeah.
I was hearing from our students. I was hearing from you. I was hearing from alumni. Our board kept saying, if we want different results, we have to do things differently. And then it just kind of came together. And then we tested it with each group. And they're like, yeah, that's where we need to plant our flag and move forward. Because even if we're only 66% successful, that's 100% improvement over what we're doing right now when it comes to helping our members prepare for career.
Yeah. So I've been having a lot of conversations with career services leaders on university campuses, and certainly senior administrators, presidents and provosts, and vice presidents of student affairs. So those are folks I interact with on a daily basis. And one of the conversations I've been trying to encourage them to think about is creating a development priority, a fundraising priority, an actual bucket within the capital campaign, a major gift officer who focuses on this around investing in work readiness and career readiness initiatives, right? And there's a which is essentially what has happened in the framework of what you've done at Lambda Chi, right? You've been able to very successfully, very quickly raise money for a very clearly articulated goal and objective. My thesis is that this might not be any different for a university who has well-heeled donors, right? Who are always interested in funding something meaningful that matters and could really move the needle. But, and it's even examples like funding, setting up funds for students to do unpaid or low paid internships, right? Where they couldn't afford to do it otherwise. And I'm hard pressed to come up with things that would be, money better spent as a donor than to directly be able to contribute to not just the work readiness of students in general, but those who have the least opportunity because they've come from underserved communities or poorer families, right? Where they just can't afford to have that kind of an unpaid work experience. So what would be your advice on universities generating a fundraising strategy around work readiness initiatives, right? Like what would you take from the Lambda Chi experience thus far and encourage a university to think about, if anything?
Well, while you were speaking, I thought to myself, the best way to make people work ready is to give them work.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if we could fund, and 60% of Lambda Chi's work, 80% pay for at least a half or more of their membership dues. So it is a maybe that's why they're attracted to this opportunity, because they already have been seasoned in work, unlike my oldest daughter, who is a professional student, right? And she's getting ready to graduate, and I'm like, oh, you have a lot to learn. Well, that's because I didn't give her the opportunity to learn earlier. And so when I talk to our alumni and our donors, they see that because they're the ones hiring this generation. I highly believe, and predict that there will be a significant amount of capital moving into those efforts, because companies have to do it anyway. They
Right.
either help the university prepare students to succeed, or they have to reteach or reinvest when they get there. And I think another thing I said to you while we were getting ready is, I don't want to do that as an employer, because I don't want to pay for you to learn to be a professional, because you're probably going to then take those skills to another employer at some point, right? So I think they'd much prefer that they come out with that seasoning, that understanding of who they are, what are their gifts and graces and their strengths, and then you can much more linearly put those attributes to work, and that's everybody wins. I mean, who wouldn't want to donate to that outcome?
Yeah, I agree, and I really think it's an opportunity, for universities to do that. One of the articles I wrote in Forbes recently was about how a real strategic investment in career services is now going to be a calling card for stronger admissions yield, right? And it's going to be a marketing play, because there are, and you kind of mentioned this before, right? Like, this generation of prospective students are some of the most astute consumers of higher education. In fact, I'll say they're the most astute consumers in the history of higher ed. They're doing the math. They're thinking about how much it's going to cost, what kind of debt they're going to have to go into, how much the average salary is for somebody with this major. Does a major from this university and the same major at this university make the same amount of money? Oh, guess what? There's differences. Even with somebody majoring in the same major at two different universities in the same state, there's differences in the earning outcomes. And these prospective students and parents are really starting to look at that through that ROI lens. There's no doubt that, we have this overarching reason why we value higher ed in the United States. The number one reason by far is to get a good or better job. There's lots of other reasons why we value it, but they're way down the list in comparison. And what's interesting, back to this fundraising point, is that of all the groups that I was ever involved in surveying in my time at Gallup about, the degree to which people believe in the work readiness of college graduates, the single most skeptical group ever were college and university trustees, which is just mind-numbing, right?
And I remember that's what made me so mad.
Yeah. That's the part that you just go, now, so that's not good news, but it's also a potential fundraising opportunity, because these are the folks who, if you bring this to them, they're going to go, darn right, that should be a priority. Why aren't we raising money for that? Why aren't we, endowing career service directors, right? Like we endow faculty chairs. Why wouldn't we want the rock star of career services and readiness and make that an endowed position? So I think there's a real opportunity here.
You're looking at a father of three, which is probably what? That's a $350 to half $500,000 investment.
At least.
At least.
Yep.
And so I'm going to be pushing my children to go to schools where they have the best opportunity to get a great job. And period. And
yeah.
So it's not just this Gen Z. Gen Z's parents kind of have figured this out too. Right. And I do agree with you. Those universities that realize that, yes, part of college is finding yourself, but you find yourself at 23 and you need a job.
Right.
And figuring out how to help people do that is like a massive competitive advantage. And I still think that way. Where's the value and where's competitive advantage? And that's what we're trying to do at Lambda Chi Alpha is we want to continue to provide our core service, which is giving men a place to belong where they can find their authentic self, and utilize that to go create better outcomes for the rest of their life. So it's an and, not an or.
Yep.
but it's something where we haven't invested enough as a community, the fraternal community, and it is our future, I think, or we're going to become a relic.
Yeah, and on that point, I mean that I think is the leadership that you guys have really taken the helm on within the fraternal world with this movement, and it is going to be a defining value proposition, right? Think about it. If the university you attend doesn't have strong career services, there aren't a lot of work integrated learning opportunities, but right, you hear that well, geez, our Lambda Chi chapter has this work professional certificate program and blah blah blah, right? Like that becomes, this is an opportunity for fraternity in a way to leapfrog universities in certain areas where the universities might be lagging. So, I think it's an exciting value proposition all around. I think that the universities that might be lagging on this will see efforts like what you're doing at a national fraternal level and say, we need to, make sure we're, at least catching up or lockstep on that. Let's talk about the other dimension that, we're going to be working on together, which is being able to offer both the current members and alumni opportunities to pursue industry recognized credentials. Obviously, this is something Kaplan's been involved with, as part of our exam prep DNA, right? We help people for, getting into law school, medical school, business school. We also help them get their, through the bar exam and, nursing licensing and engineering licensing. So we've been in an environment where we're held accountable. This isn't lifelong learning for fun and intellectual fulfillment. This is like help somebody get across a threshold to a better job, to a new career, to an increased earning, and so you guys are going to be essentially offering the opportunity for membership and alumni to pursue those things. Tell us a little bit more about how you guys are planning to do that.
Well, if you think about your freshman year and you're coming on campus, and we want the college experience and say first 5-6 years out of that to be almost like a choose your own adventure, where we're the narrator who's able to say, hey, listen, if you want to go to law school at 18, well, here's a path you can take. Here are some additional certifications. This is when you should start prepping for the LSAT. The really cool website prototype we saw the other day, it's allowing people to predict what they should take next based on what they've done and where they want to go. So it's taking a lot of the guesswork out, and it's saying, hey, listen, if you want to be a CFO and you want to have some digital security credentials, this is what you can take your junior or senior year, and you're going to be well ahead of your peers when you're being looked at as an applicant, or you're 25, 26. These are, you can get AWS certification, or you can add on and stack. So, we just, and I don't know if you came up with this concept or if my director of marketing came up with this concept, but I love the idea of stacking credentials, hard skills and soft skills, so that people can perfectly be designed for the role they want.
Yep. Yeah, that matters, right? We know there's a huge surge in interest all over the globe, especially in the United States, in shorter form educational opportunities that are geared very specifically to improving either my current performance or helping me get into a better job or earn more money. And by the way, a lot of those are all very short of a full bachelor's degree in terms of time and input, right? We've seen big growth in intensive boot camp experiences. And one of the things, so I'm a big fan of this shorter form education growth, and there's good reasons it's aligned with what people want. One of the areas I've been concerned about, though, is that there is an explosion in the broader badging certificate movement, right? Where there's now about 1 million distinct credentials of some sort in the US, and they're not all created equal, right? Because I would argue about 0.0001% of them are actually ones that move the economic needle for the person who takes them. So I think it's a game of finding the needle in the haystack, right? And when you guys have been taking a look at this, right? I know you've been trying to make sure it stays in the lane of things that are industry validated, right? There's some third party that puts a stamp on it that has value to the learner and to the person who might be hiring that learner. Your point about kind of combining certificate experiences with industry recognized credentials, that's where I think we can really sharpen our pencils here. There's a lot of high value certificate programs that aren't industry recognized credentials, but if you pair an industry credential with it, Well, now, you've got some content that was specifically valued by the individual. You've also got something that's a broadly known API of sorts, right? That employers go, oh, I know what that is. Oh, and you also took a certificate that, wow, that's really interesting. So I fully endorse, the strategy and thinking behind it. And I'm going to be really excited to hear how the undergraduate and alumni members take to it all.
Well, the most important thing we can do, and hopefully we can help each other here, is the certification is only going to be valuable if the employers are seeing return on their investment on the men and women that we send into the workforce. So we're working very hard to gain their input into what exactly does success look like. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about those outcomes, and the better we can provide, the more tools we can give them, and the more understanding of how to utilize the right tool at the right time, it will create a virtuous cycle. And that's the key. That's how we elevate above the noise.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I always use the example of the Eagle Scout, right? Boy Scouts of America, most everybody's familiar with the Eagle Scout. The Eagle Scout, when it's on somebody's resume, most folks go, whoa, oh, Eagle Scout, tell me about that, right? But there's so few things that have gotten to that level of recognition. But what happened was the rigors of getting to an Eagle Scout were so significant that people knew over time what that meant, right? So I really think there's this opportunity here, right? If you focus on the intensity and the quality of what it actually is, eventually, and in the not too distant future, employers are going to look at it and say, yeah, I've been hiring folks out of this program and they're some of my top performers or whatever it is. So tell me a little bit about, we've got a couple minutes left. How are you thinking about partnerships with employers, right? Have you guys started to think about the actual connectivity around hiring, internships, things like that? Tell me what's happening on that front.
Well, here's the great thing about fraternity, right? There's 200,000 Lambda Chi's, and they run some of the biggest corporations in the United States. So we're working with them and asking them, hey, listen, we're not asking you to guarantee a job, but if they come out with the certification, will you guarantee an interview? And right. Especially since you're going to be providing input into what success looks like. So can you help us be a part of the solution? And that's where I think we can be a partner to the universities as well, because those corporations then can see that university as a part of the solution, and well, that's a fundraising opportunity, but it's also a collaboration opportunity. We're working with the National Association of Colleges Employers. We're talking to as many different hiring managers as we can, because I'm used to hiring doctors, and this is I'm having to learn. It's so different, artificial intelligence and digital badging. And so we're, the more great voices we can talk to from the employer community, and the more we can make them invested in the solution, the easier it will be for us to get some folks to take a chance on these early adopters. And then it's just up to the students to prove they've been better equipped.
That's right. Yeah, all the best plans. You still obviously need students to put the effort in, to do the work, and ultimately, they have to be the ones that perform, whether it's the interviews or in those jobs. And so, certainly giving them the tools to do that, and the support and encouragement, all that is lining up very well in your model. I'm going to be looking forward to obviously, seeing how it progresses. We'll certainly schedule some time to connect on this venue next year, so you can give some updates on lessons learned, some of the progress. But I really appreciate you carving out some time to join me today, Troy, and best luck with everything. It's been great to be able to work with you.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure. I look forward to working with you more.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you next week at 2 Eastern.